The medical transport ship hummed quietly through space as Jake Sullivan checked his supplies one more time. He was tired after another long week, treating miners on the outer colonies, but he always felt good when he could help people. The 34 doctor from Ohio had been working in space for 5 years now, and he loved his job, even when it was hard work. Jake looked out the small window at the stars and thought about his brother Connor, who was somewhere out there commanding Earthships. He missed his family, but this work meant everything to him. Every life he saved made the loneliness worth it. The ship suddenly shook hard and Jake grabbed the wall to keep from falling. Red lights started flashing and the captain's voice came over the speakers telling everyone to stay calm. Jake felt his heart start beating faster as he heard the fear in the captain's voice outside the window. Jake saw huge black ships surrounding them. The ships were bigger than anything he had ever seen, and they looked like giant insects made of metal, sharp edges, and dark armor covered every surface. Jake had heard stories about the Vorthok Empire, but he had never seen their ships before. The transport ship stopped moving, and Jake heard heavy footsteps. In the hallway, the door to his medical bay opened, and 3 tall figures walked in. They wore black armor that seemed to move and shift like it was alive. Their faces were hidden behind masks that looked like skulls. Jake could feel electricity in the air that made his skin tingle. One of the aliens pointed at Jake and said something in a language that sounded like metal scraping against stone. Jake held up his hands to show he was not dangerous. The alien grabbed his arm with a gloved hand and pulled him toward the door. Jake had no choice but to follow. The Vorthok ship was enormous inside, with halls that seemed to go on forever. The walls were black and covered with strange symbols that glowed with blue light. Jake saw other humans from his ship being led away in different directions. He wondered if he would ever see them again. They brought Jake to a huge room where hundreds of Vorthok soldiers stood perfectly still. Around the room were captured humans from his ship, all looking scared and confused. Jake tried to stay calm, but his hands were shaking as he looked around. Then she walked in. The Empress was 12 feet tall, with skin that looked like black metal. Her body was long and moved like a snake, but she walked on 2 powerful legs. Her arms were longer than a human's and ended in hands with sharp claws. Her face was beautiful in a scary way, with large eyes that seemed to see everything. Jake could feel power coming from her like heat from a fire. The air around her crackled with electricity, and he watched other Vorthok soldiers step back when she came near. Even her own people were afraid of her. The Empress walked slowly past each human prisoner, looking at them like they were insects. Most of the people looked down at the floor, too scared to meet her eyes, but Jake watched her move, and his medical training kicked in. Something was wrong with the way she held her left side. When she came to Jake, she stopped and stared down at him with those huge eyes. Jake could see pain in them, even though she was trying to hide it. He had seen that look before, in patients who were hurt but too proud to ask for help. Without thinking, Jake pointed at her left side and made a gesture like he was examining a patient. The entire room went silent. Every Vorthok soldier turned to look at him like he had just signed his death sentence. The Empress tilted her head and looked confused. She said something in her language, and Jake could hear surprise in her voice. He slowly reached out his hand toward her injured side, expecting to be killed by her electric power, but when his fingers touched her armor, nothing happened. The Empress's eyes went very wide, and she made a sound like a gasp. Jake felt the injury under her armor and knew it was infected and needed treatment. He had touched many patients before, but never one who seemed so shocked by simple human contact. All around them, Vorthok soldiers stood frozen in disbelief. Their Empress had never been touched by another living being without causing terrible pain or death. They watched as Jake gently pressed his hands against her armor, feeling for the wound underneath. The Empress looked down at Jake's hands on her body, with wonder in her eyes. She had lived for 300 years without ever feeling another's touch. Her bioelectric field killed anything that came too close, but somehow this small human was different. Jake looked up at her and smiled the way he did with scared patients. He spoke softly, even though she could not understand his words, telling her that he could help make the pain go away. The Empress listened to his gentle voice and felt something she had never experienced. Before she gave orders to her soldiers in sharp, angry tones, Jake could tell she was telling them not to hurt him. Several soldiers looked confused, but they obeyed their Empress without question. The Empress pointed at Jake and then at herself before turning to walk away. She looked back once to make sure he was following her. The soldiers pushed Jake forward, and he walked after the tall alien queen, feeling like his whole world had just changed forevers. They left the room. Jake heard the other human prisoners calling his name, but he could not look back. The Empress had decided he belonged to her now, and Jake wondered if he would ever see Earth again. He also wondered why he was the only person who could touch the most dangerous being in the galaxy. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever. As Jake followed the Empress deeper into her ship, he had no idea that his simple act of medical kindness had just changed the fate of 3 star systems. Jake woke up in a room that was bigger than his whole apartment back on Earth. The walls were made of smooth black metal that seemed to glow with soft blue light. There was a bed that was too big for him, and strange furniture that looked like it was grown instead of built. In one corner sat medical equipment that looked far more advanced than anything Jake had ever used. The machines hummed quietly and displayed symbols he did not understand, but he could tell they were meant for healing. A voice spoke from the walls in perfect English, telling him the Empress wanted to see him. 2 guards came to get Jake, but they stayed far away from him. As they walked through the ship, he noticed that all the Vorthok kept their distance from each other too. Their armor seemed to protect them, but Jake could still feel electricity in the air whenever they got too close. The Empress waited for him in a smaller room, filled with soft cushions and warm light. She had removed some of her armor, and Jake could see the infected wound on her side more clearly. The skin around it was dark and swollen, and he knew it was getting worse. She gestured for Jake to come closer, and he walked over without fear. When he put his hands on the wound, she closed her eyes and made a soft sound, almost like a purr. Jake cleaned the infection and applied medicine from the advanced equipment. The Empress watched every move he made with fascination through a computer that translated their words. Jake learned her name was Zixandra. She told him that no living thing had ever touched her without dying. Her electric field was too strong for any other species to survive contact. She had been alone her whole life, surrounded by people, but never able to feel another's touch. Jake told her about his work as a doctor and how he liked helping people. Zixandra listened to every word like she was hearing about magic. She asked him many questions about human contact, about families and friends, and love. Jake tried to explain things that seemed normal to him, but were completely foreign to her. Days passed, and Jake found himself spending more and more time with the Empress. She would call for him to check her wound, which was healing well, but Jake could tell that was not the real reason. She just wanted someone to talk to, someone who could touch her without fear. Zixandra told Jake about her empire and how she had conquered 3 star systems. She spoke about it like it was her duty, something she had to do to make her people strong, but Jake could hear loneliness in her voice when she talked about ruling from far away, never able to get close to anyone. The ship's computers showed Jake news from across the galaxy, and what he saw made his stomach hurt. The Vorthok Empire was attacking more worlds than ever before. Planets that might have surrendered peacefully were being destroyed. Ships that tried to negotiate were being blown apart. Jake realized that his presence was somehow making things worse. Zixandra seemed more focused and confident than before, and she was using that energy to expand her empire faster than ever. The galaxy was suffering because she was no longer distracted by pain and loneliness. One morning Jake woke to alarms blaring throughout the ship. He looked out a window and saw Earth defense core ships attacking the Vorthok fleet. Laser fire lit up space like deadly fireworks, and Jake's heart raced as he recognized the design of human warships. A soldier came to get Jake and brought him to the bridge, where Zixandra stood watching the battle. Her eyes were bright with anger, and Jake could see electricity dancing across her skin. She spoke to him through the translator, telling him that humans had come to take him away. Jake watched the battle, and saw a ship he recognized. It was the Boston, commanded by Captain Lisa Martinez, who had been his friend during training years ago. She was leading Marines to rescue him and other human prisoners. Jake felt torn between happiness at seeing friendly faces and fear for what might happen to them. The Empress turned to Jake with hurt in her eyes. She asked him if he had called for rescue if he wanted to leave her. Jake tried to explain that he had no way to contact anyone, but Zixandra did not seem to believe him. Her electric field grew stronger, making the air crack and pop on the view screen. Jake could see human soldiers in space suits cutting through the hull of the ship. They were led by a man Jake recognized as Sergeant Pete Jackson, a tough Marine who never gave up on a mission. Jake knew they would not stop until they found him. Zixandra grabbed Jake's arm with her clawed hand, and he could feel her anger and fear through their strange connection. She had finally found someone who could touch her, and now they were trying to take him away. Jake saw tears in her large eyes and realized how much his presence meant to her. The battle outside grew more intense, and Jake watched human ships being destroyed by Vorthok weapons. Each explosion made him feel sick, knowing that people were dying because of him. He had to make a choice between going home to his old life or staying with the lonely alien queen who needed his touch. Echoed through the ship as the rescue team got closer. Jake could hear human voices shouting orders in the hallways, and he knew they would reach the bridge soon. Zixandra held onto him tighter, her electric field growing so strong that lights flickered and machines sparked. Jake looked into her eyes and saw centuries of loneliness and pain. He thought about all the people she had killed and all the worlds she had conquered, but he also saw someone who had never known kindness or love. She was like a wild animal that had been hurt so many times that only knew how to fight. The door to the bridge exploded inward, and human Marines rushed in with their weapons ready. Captain Martinez was with them, her face hard with determination. When she saw Jake, she called his name and told him to get away from the alien, but Jake did not move. He stayed next to Zixandra, even as she prepared to kill the humans who had come to save him. The bridge erupted in chaos as Zixandra's rage sent lightning across the room. Several Vorthok soldiers fell dead from her uncontrolled electric burst, and sparks flew from damaged computers. The human Marines scrambled for cover as the Empress's power made the air itself dangerous to breathe. Jake threw himself forward and grabbed Zixandra's arm, feeling the electricity flow through him, but somehow not hurt him. His touch seemed to ground her power, and the deadly lightning stopped. The Marines stared in shock as Jake calmed the most feared being in the galaxy with just his hands. Captain Martinez lowered her weapon but kept it ready. She could see that Jake was not acting like a prisoner. He was protecting the alien queen, even though she had just tried to kill his rescuers. Lisa had known Jake for years, and she could tell he was making his own choices. Sandra was breathing hard, and her large eyes were fixed on Jake. With desperate need, she spoke rapidly in her own language, and the ship's computer translated her words. She was begging him not to leave, her promising to do anything he wanted if he would just stay. Jake looked at his old friend Lisa, and then at the alien Empress who was holding onto him like he was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. He realized that his decision would affect more than just his own life. The galaxy was watching and waiting to see what would happen next. Lisa told Jake that Earth needed him to come home, but Jake could see in her eyes that she understood the situation was more complicated than a simple rescue mission. She had seen how his touch affected the Empress, and she was smart enough to know that meant something important. The ship shook as more human vessels attacked the Vorthok fleet. Admiral Connor Hayes, Jake's older brother, had arrived with the entire Earth Defense Force. The family resemblance was clear when Connor's face appeared on the main screen, his jaw set with determination and worry. Demanded to speak with his brother, and Jake felt his heart break a little when he saw how much older Connor looked. The war against the Vorthok had aged him, and Jake knew his brother blamed himself for not protecting him better through the communication system. Connor told Jake that 3 Earth colonies were under attack, and thousands of people were dying while they spoke. He said that Earth would do anything to get Jake back, but Jake could hear the desperation in his brother's voices. listened to the conversation, and Jake could feel her getting more agitated. She did not want to hear about human suffering because it meant Jake might choose his own people over her, but she also seemed to understand that Jake cared about the people who were dying. Captain Martinez made a suggestion that surprised everyone. She proposed a temporary deal. Earth would let Jake stay with the Empress in exchange for the Vorthok stopping their attacks on human colonies. It was not a perfect solution, but it might save lives on both sides. The idea made Jake feel sick. He would become a tool for keeping peace, a human sacrifice to prevent war. But when he looked at the viewscreen and saw burning Earth's ships, he knew that his comfort mattered less than all those lives. Connor's face went dark with anger when he heard the proposal. He said that Earth did not negotiate with terrorists and that they would find another way to stop the Vorthok. But Jake could see the fear in his brother's eyes. Fear that there might not be another ways. Sixandra seemed to understand the human conversation, even before the computer translated it. She spoke directly to Connor through the communication system, offering to spare human worlds if Jake stayed with her willingly. She made it clear that she would not accept any other terms. Jake made his choice. He told his brother that he would stay, but only if Sixandra promised to stop attacking innocent people. Connor's face went pale, and he started to argue. But Jake cut him off. He said that someone had to make the hard choices, and this time it was his turn. The agreement was reached, but nobody was happy about it. Jake would remain with the Empress and serve as a diplomatic contact between humans and Vorthok. Earth colonies would be protected, but the rest of the galaxy was still in danger as the human ships prepared to leave. Jake felt more alone than ever before. He was giving up his old life to save others, but he was also enabling a tyrant who had killed millions of beings across 3 star systems. The weight of that responsibility was almost too much to bear. Sixandra seemed happier once the humans were gone, but Jake could tell she knew he was not happy. She tried to comfort him by showing him luxury and giving him anything he wanted, but Jake just felt empty inside. Days passed, and Jake learned more about Vorthok history. Through the ship's computers, he discovered that his immunity to their electric fields was not an accident. Humans and Vorthok had evolved in the same part of the galaxy millions of years ago. Before the species spread to different worlds, the discovery changed everything. Jake realized that humans were not just immune to Vorthok electricity, they were the only species that could safely interact with them. This meant that what was happening between him and Sixandra was not unique. It could happen with other humans and other Vorthoquin. Jake told Sixandra about his discovery. Her reaction was immediate and intense. She began making new demands. She wanted Earth to send more humans to her court. She wanted humans to become a protected species under Vorthok rule. She wanted to reshape the galaxy with humans as her special allies. The Galactic Council learned about the human immunity, and their reaction was swift and brutal. They sent a message threatening to destroy Earth, rather than allow humans to ally with the Vorthok Empire. They said that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to survive. Extra. His response to the threat was exactly what Jake had feared. She began systematically destroying Council worlds to show what happened to anyone who threatened her humans. Entire civilizations were wiped out in days as the Empress demonstrated her power. Jake watched the destruction from the bridge of her flagship, knowing that his discovery had triggered this new wave of violence. He had tried to save lives, but instead he had made everything worse. The galaxy was burning, and it was partly his fault. That night Jake lay awake, thinking about all the people who had died because of his choices. He wondered if he should have let the Empress kill him that first day. Instead of touching her, maybe the galaxy would have been safer if he had never gotten involved. But when he looked at Sixandra sleeping peacefully for the first time in centuries, he also saw hope. Maybe there was still a way to fix things. Maybe his unique connection to her could be used to stop the violence instead of causing more of it. The question was whether Jake had the strength to try. Jake stood on the bridge watching another world burn as Sixandra's forces destroyed everything in their path. The planet below had been home to billions of peaceful traders who had never hurt anyone, but they had voted to support the Galactic Council's threat against Earth. The Empress stood beside him with satisfaction in her voice as she explained her plans. She wanted to remake the entire galaxy with Vorthok and humans as the ruling species. All other races would serve them or be eliminated. She truly believed she was creating a better universe. Jake felt sick as he listened to her casual talk about genocide. She spoke about killing entire species like she was planning a garden. The worst part was that she included him in all her plans, assuming he wanted the same things she did. New ship arrived carrying Dr. Amy Foster, Jake's former colleague, and the woman he had almost married before coming to space. Amy was part of a diplomatic mission, but Jake could tell from her careful questions that she was really there to evaluate his mental state. Earth's government needed to know if Jake was acting freely, or if the Empress had somehow broken his mind. They watched through hidden cameras as Amy tested Jake's responses, looking for signs that he had been brainwashed or drugged. Amy was shocked by what she saw. Jake seemed healthy and alert, but he also seemed different. He was calmer than before, but there was sadness in his eyes that had not been there when she knew him. The man she had loved was still there, but he had been changed by his experience as Extron. Did not like having another human woman on her ship, especially one who clearly had history with Jake. She watched Amy with growing suspicion and jealousy, her electric field crackling whenever Amy got too close to Jake. During a private conversation, Amy asked Jake directly if he wanted to come home. She told him that Earth had been working on weapons that might be able to stop the Vorthok Empire. He could escape during the next battle and return to his old life. Jake was tempted by the offer, but he knew that leaving would make Zixandra even more violent than before. His presence was the only thing keeping her relatively stable. If he left, she might destroy every human world out of rage and heartbreak. Amy could see the conflict in Jake's eyes, and she realized that he was trapped not by force but by his own conscience. He stayed because he believed his sacrifice was protecting others, even though it was slowly destroying him inside. The conversation was interrupted when Zixandra burst into the room, her eyes bright with anger. She had been watching them through the ship's cameras, and she did not like what she saw. Amy tried to back away, but the Empress moved faster than a human could react. Lightning erupted from Zixandra's hands and struck Amy in the chest. She died instantly, her body falling to the floor, with smoke rising from her clothes. Jake screamed and dropped to his knees beside her, but there was nothing he could do. For the first time since coming aboard the ship, Jake pulled away from Zixandra when she tried to touch him. He cradled Amy's body and wept, refusing to look at the Empress who had killed someone he cared about. Out of petty jealousy, Zixandra tried to explain that Amy was a threat that she had to protect Jake, but he would not listen. He told her to leave him alone, and for the first time in months he refused to provide the contact she craved. The rejection hit her like a physical blow without Jake's calming touch. Zixandra's emotional control began to break down. Her electric field grew unstable, causing power failures throughout the ship. Lights flickered, computers crashed, and several crew members were injured by random electrical discharges. The Empress begged Jake to forgive her, promising to bring Amy back to life if she could. She offered him anything he wanted, if he would just touch her again, but Jake remained cold and distant. The pain of losing Amy was too fresh and too raw. Outside the ship, Admiral Connor Hayes launched the largest space battle in human history. Every Earth ship available had come to fight the Vorthok fleet. Galactic Council forces joined the attack in a desperate attempt to end the Empire's expansion once and for all. The battle raged around the flagship as explosions lit up space like deadly fireworks. Jake watched from his quarters as human and alien ships destroyed each other in the darkness. He knew that his brother was out there somewhere risking his life. Zixandra came to find Jake. As the battle reached its peak, her control over her powers was slipping, and electricity arced from her body with every step. She was desperate for his touch, but afraid of what he might do if she forced him. Jake looked at her with eyes full of pain and anger. He told her that she had destroyed everything good between them by killing Amy. She had proven that she was exactly what the galaxy thought. She was a monster who killed anyone who threatened her. Control. The words hit Sixandra harder than any weapon could have. She had never cared what anyone thought of her before, but Jake's opinion mattered. More than anything else in the universe she tried to touch him, but he moved away, making her feel more alone than ever. As the battle continued, Jake realized that his unique connection to Sixandra gave him more power than he had understood. Before, he had only used it to calm her and heal her wounds, but their link worked both ways, and he could influence her electric field directly. Jake faced the hardest choice of his life. He could use his connection to help Sixandra control her devastating abilities and maybe find a peaceful solution, or he could turn her own power against her and end her reign of terror forever. The decision would determine not just their fate, but the future of billions of lives across 3 star systems. Jake looked at Amy's body and thought about all the people who had died because of his choices. Then he looked at Sixandra and saw the lonely, frightened being beneath the monster. Time was running out as the battle reached its climax. Jake had to choose whether to save the galaxy by destroying the woman who needed him, or find another way to stop the violence that was tearing the stars apart. In that moment, Jake realized that there might be a third option, something that no one had considered before, but it would require him to risk everything on the chance that even the most feared tyrant in the galaxy could learn to change. The choice was his, and the galaxy would live or die based on what he decided to do next. Jake made his choice in the middle of the greatest space battle the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of destroying Sixandra or simply calming her, he reached out through their connection and began teaching her something she had never learned: how to control her own power. For 300 years, the Empress had lived with electric fields that killed everything she touched. She had believed it was just the way she was born, a curse that could never be changed, but Jake showed her that her power could be controlled, shaped, and directed with his hands on her arms. Jake guided Sixandra through the process of modulating her bioelectric field. For the first time in her life, she felt her deadly energy respond to her will instead of her emotions. She could choose when to be dangerous and when to be harmless. The revelation shocked Sixandra to her core. Everything she had believed about herself was wrong. She was not cursed to be alone forever. Her isolation had been caused by lack of control, not by nature. The loneliness that had driven her to conquer worlds had been unnecessary. Jake felt her amazement through their connection as she learned to touch objects without destroying them. She picked up a flower from her private garden and held it gently in her clawed hands. The petals did not wither and die under her touch. They remained beautiful and alive with tears in her large eyes. Sixandra sent out orders to her fleet, calling off the attack on the human ships. Her generals were confused and angry, but they obeyed their empress, even when they did not understand her commands. The battle stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Admiral Connor Hayes received the ceasefire order with suspicion, but he held his fire when he saw that the Vorthok ships had powered down their weapons. He opened communication with his brother's ship, not knowing what to expect. Jake appeared on the view screen looking tired, but determined. He told Connor that things were going to change, that the war could end if everyone was willing to try something new. The Empress stood beside him, her electric field calm and controlled. For the first time, negotiations began slowly, with representatives from Earth and the Galactic Council meeting aboard neutral ships. Sixandra's offer was radical. She wanted to transform the Vorthok Empire from conquerors into protectors, using their power to defend other species instead of destroying them. Many of her own generals rebelled against what they saw as weakness. They had built their lives around conquest, and they did not want to become peaceful guardians. A civil war erupted within the Vorthok Empire as traditionalists fought against reformers. Captain Martinez found herself leading a joint human and Vorthok task force against the rebel faction. It was strange fighting alongside aliens who had been enemies just days before, but the reformed Vorthok proved to be valuable allies in battle. Jake worked with loyal Vorthok commanders, teaching them the control techniques he had shown their empress. It was slow work, because each individual had to learn to master their own electric field, but progress was being made across the fleet. The civil war lasted for months, with battles raging across multiple star systems. Jake stayed close to Zixandra, helping her maintain control during the stress of fighting her own people. She had never imagined that changing would be so difficult. During quiet moments between battles, Jake and Zixandra talked about the future she wanted to build. She spoke of mixed colonies where humans and Vorthok could work together, of cultural exchange that had been impossible before, of peace instead of conquest. Verth negotiated carefully for protected status and access to advanced Vorthok technology in exchange for providing specialists who could safely work with Vorthok society. It was the beginning of an alliance that would reshape galactic civilization. The personal cost for Jake was enormous. He could never return to his simple life as a colony doctor. His relationship with Zixandra had evolved beyond anything either species had experienced before. They were partners in building a new kind of civilization. 5 years after the Civil War ended, Jake stood in a medical facility that treated patients from a dozen different species. His immunity to Vorthok electricity made him the galaxy's first truly universal healer, capable of treating anyone, regardless of their biology. Indra watched from the observation deck as Jake worked with a young Vorthok who was learning to control her powers. The sight filled her with pride and love. Jake had given her more than just physical touch. He had given her hope for the future. They had been married in a ceremony that made headlines across the galaxy, the first interspecies union of its kind. The wedding had been both beautiful and symbolic, showing that former enemies could become partners and lovers. Admiral Connor Hayes visited the new colony world that served as capital for the reformed Vorthok Protectorate. He found his brother changed but happy, working to bridge the gap between two very different civilizations. Connor had initially opposed to Jake's choice to stay with the alien empress, but he could see now that his brother had found his true purpose. Jake was not just a doctor anymore. He was a diplomat, a teacher, and a symbol of what was possible when different species worked together. The colony world was a marvel of cooperation, with human and Vorthok architecture blending together in ways that neither species could have imagined alone. Children of both races played together in parks while their parents worked side by side in laboratories, and Factory Shinshinzra had kept her promise to reform her empire. But the work was far from over. There were still rebel groups that wanted to return to the old ways of conquest. There were other species that did not trust the reformed Vorthok, and there were humans who thought Jake was a traitor. But progress was being made every day. More Vorthok learned to control their abilities. More colonies welcomed mixed populations. More species joined the growing alliance that protected the Outer Rim from remaining threats. In the evening, Jake and Zixandra would walk through their city hand in hand, something that would have been impossible just years before. Her touch was now gentle instead of deadly, and his presence had transformed her from a feared tyrant into a beloved leader. Often thought about Amy and the price that had been paid for this peace. Her death still haunted him, but he tried to honor her memory by making sure that no one else would have to die because of misunderstanding between species. The galaxy had feared Zixandra for centuries, seeing only the monster she had been forced to become. But Jake had seen the lonely, frightened being beneath the armor, and had chosen compassion over fear. His decision had saved not just her, but billions of lives. As Jake treated his last patient of the day, he reflected on how much had changed. The title people had once whispered in fear now meant something different. The galaxy had feared her, but only a human medic could touch the alien queen, and that touch had changed everything.